Kanur. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Horizon TV. You are watching The Muslim Insight, the show that brings you your weekly news recap on matters affecting the Muslim community, as well as a review of the Friday Bulletin, the only Muslim news bulletin in the country. But before we continue, first we want to give you the headlines.
We are now having to counter this negative image by showing people the true image of Islam.
Mosque Tour. Darul Arqam Islamic Center holds an open day for students from the Swedish School of Nairobi for a mosque tour.
Kama mimi nasumbuliwa na meno haya, ukifika pale hospitali kubwa paka 500 ama 1000 ndio uweze kutibiwa.
Free medical camp. Hundreds benefit from free medical camp in Kilifi, organized by Direct Aid Kenya.
$42,000 students this year will equally be funded fully by the government of Kenya. Their parents will contribute nothing.
Funding university education. President William Ruto unveils scholarships, loans and bursaries to vulnerable and needy university students.
Now, thank you for that. The Jamia Mosque Committee Nairobi will hold its annual general meeting tomorrow, May 6th, 2023. The meeting is expected to bring together members of the Mosque Committee to discuss the mosque's progress over the past year, review the financial report, among others. Jamia Mosque Nairobi is one of the oldest and most prominent mosques in Kenya and serves as a spiritual and community center for the Muslim community in Nairobi and the surrounding areas.
It took 8 years. Yeah, so alhamdulillah, it's like there was this.
Thank you for that, Mariam. Now moving on to Kilifi County, where hundreds of residents in Kibarani area benefited from a free medical camp organized by an international non-governmental organization. More than 600 people received free medication, checkup and treatment for various illnesses from Direct Aid Kenya, which organized a 3-day medical camp in the area targeting the locals.
Bulia Conte, a beneficiary of the free medical camp, said she was unable to raise 500 Kenya shillings required to get treatment at a government hospital.
Wengi wa katika hichi kijiji hatuna uwezo wa kugharamikia matibabu katika hospitali zetu. Tunayo hospitali kubwa hapa Kilifi ambayo inajiita ni hospitali ya serikali. Lakini ukifika pale matibabu yao ni ya hali ya juu. Kama mimi nasumbuliwa na meno haya, ukifika pale hospitali kubwa paka 500 ama 1000 ndio uweze kutibiwa. Kama ni kung'olewa hilo jino, mtu mmoja mtu mzima unang'olewa na 500. 500 hiyo ukiangalia hali ya uchumi, unga mfuko mmoja sahi ni shilingi 200. Utaangalia 500 kununua chakula ama utaangalia 500 ile kwenda kwa matibabu.
She said the cost of living had pushed many families out of the National Hospital Insurance Fund and urged the government to make healthcare affordable to the less fortunate in the community.
Niliwaambia haiwezekani kwamba mimi rais nalipa shilingi 1,700 kila mwezi, na mama mboga na mtu ya bodaboda analipa shilingi 500 ili akuwe na kadi ya NHIF. Mimi mshahara yangu ni 1,000,000. Yule bodaboda mapato yake ni 5,000. Kuna ungwana pale kweli? So nimesema tumebadilisha the contribution mechanism and the contribution formula. Sasa yule ambaye mlikuwa mnalipa kwa NHIF shilingi 500, sasa tutateremsha chini ikuje shilingi 300 kwa wale mmekuwa mkilipa shilingi 500.
Her sentiments were echoed by Manyaso Kampi, a beneficiary of the free medical camp.
Most of the conditions zenye tumepatana nazo kwa wazee ni pressure, wengine wamekuwa na some growths. Tumeweza kuwatuma mapicha, na watoto wengi wamekuwa na shida ni ngozi, ugonjwa wa ngozi sana, nafikiri pengine kwa sababu mazingira.
According to Abdurrahman Sheikh Ahmed, the manager Direct Aid International in Kilifi County, said the organization plans to hold frequent medical camps to reach more people in the area.
Last year tulifanya sehemu mbalimbali, ni Fumpini na pia Kiparani tulifanya last year na Kololeni, lakini saa mwaka huu tumeanza na Kiwapa na tutaendelea katika sehemu zingine Vitongeuji na mji ngine pia tutaifanya.
Thank you for that. Now moving on, Darul Arqam Islamic Center in Kileleshwa, Nairobi held its open day for non-Muslim students from the Swedish School of Nairobi for a mosque tour to help them understand Islam. Speaking during the tour, Omar Hussein said the move to allow students tour the mosque was to open up the mosque and ask questions and clear the misconceptions surrounding Islam, specifically from the media.
Darul Arqam Islamic Center in Kileleshwa, Nairobi held its first open day for the students to tour the mosque and ask questions regarding Islam in a move to promote a better understanding of the religion.
The school came and visited Darul Arqam Masjid in Kileleshwa. We took them around. They got to listen to the verses of the Holy Quran. At the same time, they got to hear about the adhan. They were shown the facilities. They sat in the prayer hall. This was an experience that these kids and their teachers had never seen before. We were really happy to be part of it. We could see the nur and the eagerness in their faces.
The students from the Swedish School of Nairobi were taken on a tour of the masjid, where they got a chance to be told the history of Islam and listen to the call of prayer.
It's an initiative to welcome everybody from other faiths to come to the mosque and the Islamic Center to get introduced to Islam from Muslims in daily life, how they act in the mosque, why do they come to the mosque, and to see us in our environment, reacting in a community, in a Muslim community. So we really want this initiative to be in all the Islamic centers in Kenya.
Speaking to Horizon TV, Omar Hussein said it was important to open up our mosque and Islamic institutions to people of other faiths so as to have a better understanding of our religion.
We have a responsibility to portray Islam in the best way we can. As you know, one of the challenges we are facing today is there's a lot of media information about Islam, and most of it is not positive. So we are now having to counter this negative image by showing people the true image of Islam. And these students, you could see in their faces, you know, they've seen Islam from within. They came to the masjid, asked about what's the salah, how do we pray. They were asking about Hajj. And one of the most amazing things we found out is they had taken their time to research before this visit. This is young kids, year 6, year 7, year 8.
Now moving on, President William Ruto has unveiled a funding through government scholarships, loans and bursaries to vulnerable and extremely needy students who will not pay school fees effective this year. The president said students from needy households joining universities will receive government scholarships of up to a maximum of 53% and loans of up to 40%, adding that their households will only pay 7% of the cost of their university education. According to the model, the less needy students joining TVET will be funded 32% for government scholarships, 48% for loans, and their households will pay only 20% of the costs. The president said a new funding model is inevitable to solve the financial crises that public universities are in.
Students from less needy households joining university will receive government scholarship of up to 53% and loans from the government of up to 40%, a total of 93%. 7% will be contributed by their households to meet the university education. Category number 3, the able students from able households joining university will be funded through a government scholarship up to a maximum of 38% of the cost of the program and 55% in form of loans. Again, in this case, their households will pay only 7%. The difference between these two is that the needy students will get more scholarship and less loan. The able students will get more loans and less scholarship. In the TVET category, the less needy students joining TVET will receive government scholarship up to a maximum of 50% and 30% loans from the government. Their households will pay 20% of the cost. The able students joining TVET will be funded to the tune of 32% for government scholarship and 48% for government loans, and their households will equally contribute 20% of their cost. Students will be categorized according to 4 levels of need. Vulnerable, actually 3 levels: vulnerable, less vulnerable, and able. All students shall be supported adequately to meet the cost of the program they choose to pursue. No student will ever be left behind. The government shall fully fund the vulnerable students, who comprise 29% of students joining university. And these are 45,000 students will be funded fully by the government of Kenya. And in our TVET institutions, 42,000 students this year will equally be funded fully by the government of Kenya. Their parents will contribute nothing.
Thank you for that. Now, a section of elderly persons have called on the national government to consider increasing their Inua Jamii monthly stipend to help them pay for the National Hospital Insurance Fund and other expenses, while decrying harsh economic times coupled with prolonged drought. The elderly said that the delays in releasing the funds from the government has caused a lot of misery and suffering. They said as the medical attention, and thus asked the government to allocate some extra money specifically for their medical expenses.
Ndaragwa Deputy County Commissioner Walter Ngaire said that the government has put in a lot of effort in ensuring that as many people as possible are benefiting from the cash transfer program.
We have a lot of our people benefiting from this cash transfer program, and we thank the national government for that. We have approximately 5,000 people on the cash transfer program within the constituency benefiting. So we are hoping that probably during the next financial year there will be an upscale so that more can benefit, especially those that have already clocked 70 years and above, so that we have more people getting the cash transfer program.
Ngaira, who was speaking in Dongoino area in the Ragwa constituency in Nyandarua County when he oversaw the distribution of relief food from the National Drought Management Authority, urged the elderly also to invest part of the money in farming to ensure the money benefits many at the household level.
So what we are urging the national government is to move with speed and at least avail the CIN for top dressing, so that now they can be able to make use of the available rains tuweze kurudi mashambani na tupate chakula, because relief food is not a sustainable program, but tukipata chakula ya kutosha tutaweza kusaidia watu wetu na watakuwa wako sawa kabisa.
The Inua Jamii program under the Ministry of Labour targets orphans, vulnerable children, older persons and persons with severe disabilities. Under the Inua Jamii program, the beneficiaries are eligible for Kenya shillings 2,000 monthly stipend.
Thank you for that. Now moving on to Garissa County, where police are holding 4 suspected bandits who were arrested in Nuno area after a swift operation by National Police officers in conjunction with the Border Patrol unit following a tip from the public. Police recovered 4 firearms, 19 rifle magazines, 500 rounds of ammunition and several mobile phones from the suspects. Addressing the press after the incident, Garissa County Police Commander Thomas Ngewa said that the suspects will be arraigned in court after conclusion of further investigations.
We received information from our officers that while they were on their normal patrols along Nuno area, they got information that there were some people dressed in security attire terrorizing members of public along those cut lines. So on rushing to the area, they managed to spot a Probox vehicle which had 4 occupants. On further interrogation, they discovered that each of the 4 occupants had an AK-47 with 5 rounds, with 5 magazines, each with AK-47 rifle, and each rifle had 5 magazines loaded with a lot of ammunition, numbering to about 543 rounds. So the culprits were arrested, they were brought to station, and they recovered what you can see. We suspect them to be these are the bandits who have been terrorizing members of the public along that area for quite some time.
Thank you for that. Now that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, but we're coming back after a short break with the review of today's Friday bulletin.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون.
Enyi mlioamini, munapoitwa kuhudhuria swala ya Ijumaa, fanyeni haraka kuikimbilia, muache biashara zenu, hilo ni bora ikiwa mwelewa.
Isikilizeni kwa umakinifu khutba ya Ijumaa
ili uzidi kujenga imani yako na kupata faida nyingi ya siku hii.
Coming to you every Friday from Jamia Mosque Nairobi.
Live on Horizon TV.
Quote of the day.
Imam Muhammad bin Idris al-Shafi'i said, "Whenever I voice my opinion or formulate a principle where something contrary to my view exists, on the authority of the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, then the correct view is what the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, has said, and it is my view."
Pearls of Wisdom.
Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, may Allah be pleased with him, narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "O Allah, I take refuge in you from anxiety and sorrow, weakness and laziness, miserliness and cowardice, the burden of debts, and from being overpowered by men."
Verse of the day.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
ويوم نسير الجبال وترى الأرض بارزة وحشرناهم فلم نغادر منهم أحدا وعرضوا على ربك صفا لقد جئتمونا كما خلقناكم أول مرة بل زعمتم أن لن نجعل لكم موعدا.
Quote of the day. Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu said, "Do not quarrel and do not create differences among yourselves. Hold fast to the rope of Allah and maintain unity in your ranks."
Uislamu ni dini yenye mpangilio ulio kamili na taratibu zake humpa fursa kila mja kuifahamu na kuelewa.
Muislamu yoyote lazima achukue jukumu la kuifahamu dini yake, kuanzia kwenye shahada, ashhadu, nakiri kwa moyo,
kisha usafi wa kimwili.
Hapo ndipo huanza safari ya kumwabudu Mola wake.
Usikose kujiunga nasi kila siku ya Jumamosi live kwenye kipindi Ufahamu Uislamu, ili ujifunze mengi usiyojua kutoka Horizon TV.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Horizon TV. My name is Nadia Osman and my sign language interpreter is Ilhan Noor. And we're back after a short break with the review of today's Friday Bulletin. And joining me in studio today, I have Sheikh Salim Charo. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
I'm good, alhamdulillah. Sheikh, how are you this morning?
I'm good, alhamdulillah.
It's very nice to have you with us here in the studio.
It's a pleasure.
Alhamdulillah. So we're looking at the front page of today's Friday Bulletin. And Sheikh, this is a story that has shocked the nation, I think even in the international community. where we had the Shakahola forest cult massacre, and now we're seeing religious leaders from different religions are coming out and telling the government to be very, very, harsh and strict rather in probing what happened. And they're talking about not just, the people who committed the crime, the pastor who committed the crime and people who helped him, but also, officers and officials who, were able to facilitate, because this is something definitely that was going on. What would you say about this?
Number one, I think it's a very shocking occurrence that has taken place, and it's in the global attention.
Yes.
Yeah, because it has been featured in also in international news outlets to say, and I think it's sad that this has been happening for years, and I'm really wondering how the government's intelligence were not able to, to get notice of this.
Yes.
And, looking at 110, so far, these are the numbers that we have. So I think the government should, I think, number one, should do a thorough investigation.
Yes.
And I think it's not only that 110, I believe there are more people.
Yes.
And also some of the things which are happening, I really don't know whether some of his followers are still in the forests. I believe they are, maybe they are on the run. And once, they've been brainwashed, I think they'll take that opportunity also to go on and continue brainwashing others. And that's why we had Interreligious Council here,
yes.
Coming up with this presser and, urging the government to take, strict, intervention and make sure that, we don't want to see such things happening again.
Yes.
Yes.
Sheikh, we're talking about, when we talk about religious leaders, we're talking about SUPKEM, which is the council of, Supreme Council of Kenyan Muslims, and we have NCCK, and then we also have the Hindu Council and the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, where we're also seeing that there has been a task force led by Tana River Senator Danson Mungatana, which they have been elected to, investigate the proliferation of religious organizations. And when we're looking at this story, it other than shocking the nation, what we're seeing is, do you believe that there is a way that as a country, we do have the freedom of religion and worship? Does this reach a time where we have to start discussing where those freedoms inafikia?
Number one, I think it's important for the government to know what's happening, but it's not for the government to regulate, religious institution. But also, when we get to such a point,
yes.
where we have people, they get people to, to lose their families, lose their properties, and even loss of life.
Yes.
This is extreme. And this is where also the government also needs to come in. But to say that they want to regulate, how, it's something that cannot be accepted, number
yes.
one. And these are constitutional,
right.
We have a constitutional right. We have that right to worship. We have freedom of worship.
Yes.
And I think what is required, at least we can self-regulate,
yes.
as religious leaders, because in some instances, a Muslim cannot go and and look into what Christians are doing.
Yes.
But within us as Muslims, we can self-regulate and look at how things are being done, because we know what Islam, teaches, and we know the teachings of Islam. So
yes.
at least, as Muslims, so at least we can have a SUPKEM or, a form of a caucus within Muslims,
yes.
that at least can be there. At least they should know what's happening. But for the government to say that they'll regulate on how people worship, what times, you know, and stuff, I think that that will be contravening, you know, the right of worship.
Yes.
Yes.
Sheikh, when you're talking about extreme, we can term this as religious extremism. And as Muslims, you know, at a point in, you know, in this country, there were moments where, you know, Islam also as a religion, there are a lot of extremisms that was going on. And you're talking about having bodies like Subkem, you know, individually in our religion, to probably look into what is going on. What would you tell, especially now, our Christian fellows in the country? I know that this is a position that as Muslims we've been in this, and now it's them who are put in the spotlight.
Yeah. In fact, this is religious. You know, this is extremism.
Yeah.
This is terrorism.
Yeah.
You know, it's only that he was unarmed.
Yes.
You know, and you know, through brainwashing, and you know, when you talk of extremism, it's not only use of firearms, because you'll see whenever there are, and because I saw what you've just reported earlier of the 4 bandits. Some of the media outlets reported as terrorists. You know, but why is it? It's simply because they were Muslims and they were armed. And on the other hand, this guy has he has killed over 100 people, unarmed. And, you know, extremism comes in, you know, it's also through brainwashing. We talk of radicalization.
Yes.
You know, and this person, Mackenzie, you know, was able to radicalize his, you know, his followers.
Yes.
You know, some of it, because it's extreme, because they got to a point where these people, you know, are hit with a blunt object.
Yes.
You know, earlier today I saw a clip where someone very malnutrition, and you know, he was asked, he had some injuries, and he was asked, and he said, you know, I was hit simply because, you know, I drank some water. You know, when you get to this point, you know, this is where you even start wondering, you know, what type of religion is this?
Yes.
You know, and this is what we've been also preaching against, because we know what Islam teaches. If it's Christianity, Christian teachings are there, and there are people who are learned and they know that area. So when we get to that point where you are told to fast until you die, you know, this is even in Islam, we are discouraged. There's a psalm called Wisal, you know, when you just fast without breaking your fast. You know, it's haram. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited from it. And, you know, he's asking his followers, you know, I believe there's more of this, and the government needs to, you know, get deep into this matter.
Yes.
Because it's, and I believe he's not the only one. You know, others should be also investigated.
Yes.
Those within the government, his, you know, accomplices, the other, you know, from that area.
And police officials as well.
Police, because, you know, in Kenya, you are not allowed to bury a person without a burial permit.
Yes.
You know, the government should be aware. You know, so what happens, you know, all those people, where are their records? You know, these are the questions that everyone is asking. So meaning the government knew about it.
Yes.
So Shakahola was bought as whose land? For what purpose? You know, and what were the activities that were going on there? You know, these are answers that need to be, questions that need to be answered. And I believe there are more who are his accomplices. And I believe there are more people who have gone through the same fate, which is very unfortunate for our country. So, and this matter should be treated as a terrorism, as an extremism, you know, a religious extremism, and it should not be taken lightly. It should not be taken lightly. This is not a person that should be, you know, given, you know, bond, and you know, we are talking of murder, you know, of even killing one person, you know, how, you know, heinous this act is.
Yes.
And we are talking of hundreds. You know, how many families, I think there are over 400 families that are looking for their loved ones.
Yes.
And, you know, giving them bail, I don't know, for, you know, 10,000 and, you know, 3 million, you know, that's not acceptable.
Yes.
Yes.
As you've mentioned, this ordeal really raises a lot of questions in our country. Now, moving on, just on the same page, we're seeing the High Court is to be constructed in Lamu. And once again, this is on the front page of today's Friday Bulletin. And we're seeing that Chief Justice Martha Koome has said the judiciary will commence the construction of a High Court and Magistrate Court in Hindi word, which is in Lamu. What would you say about this, Sheikh, especially with having courts being brought closer to people?
I think it's a good thing. Number one, considering Lamu as one of the counties that has been marginalized for for long.
Yes.
And bringing these services, this is not a privilege. Number one, it's it's their right. It's their right, and there are many more other services that need to be taken closer to the people, especially to Lamu.
Yeah.
If you've ever traveled to Lamu, it's as if you're traveling to another country. You get to a point where you have to identify yourself, you have to be escorted, and a lot of and we really need to get rid of these things.
Yes.
And these people need to feel as Kenyans, and these services need to be brought closer to the people. And there are many more other services that need to be brought, and not only in Lamu,
yes,
also in other counties.
Yes.
Yeah, because we know that there are many other counties that have been neglected and for so long, and they themselves, they don't consider themselves as Kenyans because of the negligence that has been there. But it's a good thing, and it shows how the devolution is is working, and it also need to be, at least it needs to be more needs to be done into devolution. It needs more funds, and
yes,
also we really need to see what these monies, once they are taken to counties, what they are doing also. Yes. But it's a good thing, and yeah, that's something very positive, at least.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a very commendable move. Just to finish up on the first page, we're seeing a picture of a fun day for orphans. And Sheikh, I know that Eid was a couple of weekends ago.
Yes, yes.
And it's very nice to see people who come from needy backgrounds and orphans who, also get to enjoy their Eid, and, fellow Muslims giving back to the community. What would you say about this shortly?
Mashallah, this is a very nice thing, because when we think of the less privileged in the community, and looking at the orphans, it's not their fault that they don't have parents.
Yes.
And they are in whatever situation that they are in. But when also a community thinks of them and thinks of doing something for them, is also very commendable. And because most of these orphans are, are kept in orphanages or children's home,
yes,
where in most cases whoever takes care of them, they just look into the very basic. And in most cases like Eid, you don't find most children's home, having this opportunity of, taking these children to have fun, or for a fun day, or, stuff. But for people to think of, to bring these children together and have fun just like any other child within the community is something that is very commendable.
Yes. Now we're moving on to the second page of today's Friday Bulletin. Just remind our viewer that this is the second page of today's Friday Bulletin. We're seeing Mombasa imams and madrasa teachers have been asked to form a SACCO. And Sheikh, when we're talking about this, it will be able to help them, individually, and also, growing themselves, and also boosting their welfare. What would you say about this move?
I think it's a very good thing, and as a former chair of imams here in Nairobi,
yes,
I think these were some of the things that had proposed for the imams, but they never got to see the light of the day. But it's something that is not only in Mombasa, countrywide, because also looking at imams, if you look, because I do divide imams, because there are those imams in those well-established mosques, mashallah, they are well off, but there are these imams in some other areas which their conditions, they are they are in a very I don't know, I don't want to use the word pathetic, but they are not in a good. So when they come together and they form a circle, you know, especially a Sharia compliant circle, I think it will be of their own benefit. It will benefit them individually, and this is something that they also need to look into. We have this organization. We have Council of Imams and Preachers of Kenya. We have Kenya Council of Imams and Ulamas. I think it's something that they should sit down and look into this and see how they can have a countrywide Sharia compliant. It's good they you know, they establish their own instead of just relying on others, even though we have some few with Sharia compliant, which will also be good to start with. But more importantly is for imams to have their own circle, which is Sharia compliant. It will be of their own benefit.
And now moving on to the next story, we're seeing that, just to touch on this very briefly, tomorrow will be Jamia Mosque Nairobi's AGM meeting. And they're going to discuss, you know, how the mosque has been running, you know, various topics, including our programs, you know, community outreach programs and future development. Sheikh, in your opinion, how do you think Jamia Mosque has definitely performed, especially with the community and dawah programs?
Mashallah, they're doing a lot for the ummah. It's only that many people don't know, and it's as if they don't like publicity. But for what they've done for the ummah, it's a lot. From, you know, supporting dawah activities, because when we talk of imams, we've just talked of imams, you'll find that at least they support imams in certain mosques. They pay for their salaries and so on. We have dawah symposiums, which are, you know, sponsored and supported by Jamia. And we know of, you know, teachers, you know, IRE teachers and IRE and Arabic teachers that are supported by Jamia. And also, you know, there are scholarships that are also, you know, awarded for IRE and Arabic, you know, teachers. All these, now I'm looking at it from dawah perspective, but also look at the, you know, when you talk of, you know, medical bills, you know, the Jamia Mosque, you know, is the center, you know, of all Muslim activities in the country. You cannot have a fundraising without consulting or even, you know, seeking, you know, a bit of assistance from Jamia. And they've really assisted many mosques to be constructed, and a lot more. So I think they are the center of, you know, the excellence when it comes to Muslim matters. And you know, also I think this is considering that they've been here for almost a century. You know, maybe 80 something years, and you know, heading to 100. So I think maybe due to all this, maybe they've been able to have this experience, and they've known the needs of the Muslim Ummah in Nairobi and in the country, and this has, you know, as a result, they've been able to have this. And, you know, talking of Jamia Mosque, HorizonTV is here, courtesy of Jamia Mosque.
It is. So now we're moving on to just to briefly touch on this next one. We're seeing that a total of 1,200 households in Marsabit County benefited from food rations. And Sheikh, just to touch on this, when we're talking about giving back to the community during Ramadan, and especially now continuing forward, you know, Kenya faced a very, very bad drought severe drought situation in the country. And we're talking about, we've seen a lot of Muslim organizations, you know, Muslim individuals, you know, making sure that they, at least they do something for those communities who are, you know, having the repercussions of the drought. What would you say about this?
Mashallah, it's a good thing, and that's the spirit of Ramadan, because when you are fasting, you need to also think of those who are less privileged. And we also have a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ used to be more generous during the month of Ramadan. And also considering the, you know, the drought situation in the country, that was also our, you know, our responsibility to take care of our brothers in those drought-stricken areas. And I think it's a spirit that we should also keep it post-Ramadan.
Yes.
And also the other thing that I should mention is the government under the drought management, I don't know, response. I think they need to look into, you know, some sustainable interventions.
Yes.
The county governments also,
yes.
because they know these areas, you know, how they are, you know, they are, you know, asal lands, the arid and semi-arid lands. But they should look into, you know, I think with a call by the president, where he asked the country to plant over 15 billion trees. I think during this rainy season, we've seen Marsabit, you know, flooding.
Exactly.
And, yeah. So why don't they take this initiative and plant trees and ensure, you know, in areas where these trees will be, at least they'll assist them, you know, eventually. And, you know, they should adopt also these trees. It's not only, you know, just planting trees.
Yes.
You know, grow trees, you know, adopt those trees. Make sure that they grow at least, you know, and so on. So these are some of the things. And other intervention that we should look at how, you know, because most of these communities, they are pastoralists. They rely on animals. You know, what are the interventions by the county governments?
Yes.
You know, when it comes to, you know, the feeders, you know, feeding of these animals, you know, where do they get, you know, in case of droughts, you know, what are they supposed to, you know, what interventions do they have?
Yes.
You know, and they're also looking at, you know, food security. You know, some of these areas, you know, they are very fertile.
Yeah.
Some of these areas are very fertile, but it's only that they are people, they are not used to, you know, farming and so on. But at least we can have some, you know, some schemes and plant some foodstuffs that will benefit the people. Thank you.
Yes. Sheikh, I'm just being reminded that because of time, and I want us to touch on some topics that are of importance. So just to notify the readers, some of the conversations that are, or stories that are on the Friday Bulletin is page 3, and page 3 basically talks about prayer in Islam, and it's a beautiful article written by Professor Shahul Hamid, where he talks about a special connection with God. And I think once the viewers are able to get their copy of today's Friday Bulletin, they'll be able to read on that further. Sheikh, now I just want us to really quickly move on to the 6th and 7th page, because I know there is a story there that I want us to discuss in detail. But before we get to the story, I'm seeing Kenya champs in the Muhammad 6th Quran competition. Sheikh, you're also someone who, you know, is a religious scholar, an ustad. What would you say about Quran competitions and its importance, especially to young people in the Muslim community?
MashaAllah, this way of, you know, encouraging our young, you know, children.
Yes.
And not only young children, but to encourage Muslims to memorize the book of Allah. You don't memorize it with the intention of winning a Quran competition or winning a prize, but you know, this also encourages, because number one, once you memorize the Quran, it's a way of preserving the book of Allah. That's one. And secondly, you know, we are required in a number of, you know, acts of worship to recite Quran, like in Salah and so on.
Yes.
Because, so this, and mainly when we look at the Prophet, he memorized the entire Quran, you know, and you know, this is also applying the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ when he memorized the entire Quran.
Yes.
And there is no other book that has been memorized at this, you know, the way the Quran has been memorized. I believe that there is a good number of people who have memorized the, you know, the Quran. There is no other book in the entire world that has been memorized the way Quran has been memorized. So I think it's important to encourage, because to encourage our children and every Muslim to memorize a portion of the Quran and you know, recite it also in that melodious voice also, because you know, because it attracts a person when, you know, you have a person who recites it, you know, melodiously. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the story that I wanted us to talk about is what is going on in Sudan. And for those who are not aware of what is going on in Sudan, Sudan just plunged into civil war, and we're seeing an article being written, Khartoum fighting continues despite new ceasefire. And these are different groups with military background that are fighting for control. And you know, Sudan is a Muslim nation. So somebody may ask, what does Sudan, you know, what does it mean to me as a Muslim? You know, there's something the Prophet ﷺ said that if one, it's like the body, if one organ is in pain, the whole body is in pain. So what would you say about this, Sheikh?
I think it's very sad that now in this region we are also faced by another country getting into a civil war.
Yes.
We've experienced a number of countries, and it's very, you know, it's very sad, especially, and you know, this is a Muslim country, but what I will say, it's a civil war, but it's not a civil war. It's, you know, the two generals that are fighting, they are proxies of, you know, of foreign countries that have interest in Sudan.
Yes.
You know, that's how simple I can put it. And it's very wrong when the two generals get to a point where their interest is, you know, to seize power, and they don't, at the expense of their own civilians, of their own people. And you know, when you get to that point, and that's a Muslim country, and you know why you know was General Burhan was not calling for elections, because they knew very well once they call for elections, you know, what they call Islamists, they are going to win the elections, because it has always been a Muslim country. So, and that's why, you know, and at some instances, if you've been following, you know, what has been happening in Sudan, you know, even at times he used to threaten, you know, the foreign countries that he'll call for elections, knowing very well that if I call for elections, who are going to win? Because they had no chances of winning. So, and that's why, you know, they've gotten to that point where, you know, they are being pressured, they are being, you know, funded, and, you know, at the expense of their own people. It's very wrong. I think it's important for them to remember what the Prophet ﷺ said when two Muslims face each other in a battlefield. فَالْقَاتِلُ وَالْمَقْتُولُ فِي النَّارِ. The killer and the one who is killed, all will go to Jahannam. Why? Because this person killed his fellow Muslim, and the other one was keen on killing the other. It's only that he did not get that chance. So I think this is what they should put in mind, that they should put the interests of the country first, and also their own people, and also for the sake of religion. And I think what's happening in Sudan also affects us, because some of the universities here that you know, initially before they were awarded the charter, you know, we relied heavily on Sudan, and to date, since, you know, you're from those demonstration until now, the interim government took over, you know, there are people who have not even received their certificates, simply because, you know, there is that shift of, you know, power. So you look at it that way, and there are people who have studied in Sudan, various professions which are locally recognized here in the country. So let's not look at the crisis as, you know, as an Arab, as a Muslim crisis. Let's also look at it as a neighbor's crisis, because when a neighbor's house, you know, gets on fire, it means next is yours.
And Sheikh, when you're talking about various, you know, Kenyan Muslims who, and not just Muslims, but Kenyans who, a lot of them had, from time ago, they had been going to Sudan to probably study and come back home. And when we're looking at that, we're talking about also the effects of war, especially to a society. And recently I saw a young kid from Khartoum who was in Saudi Arabia because they've sought refuge, they've left the country, some are still trying to leave the country, and he was asked by a reporter, would you want to go back? And he said, I don't want to go back. And he was, I think, around 7 or 8. And you can see that a small child like that sees the kind of conflict that is going on in the country and automatically just says, I don't want to go back there. And it's their home. And you see that really plays a very big part in, the mental stability of a young person.
Generally, the whole country is, because there's no one who is, other than the generals, but any other civilian and citizen, they are the ones who, who pay the price. They lose their properties, they lose their lives, and, they lose everything.
Yes.
And, it's only that it's their, it's what they will call their motherland or a country. But most people wouldn't, think of getting back to such countries.
Yes.
Yeah. So and it's very sad because we also in the near future will be talking of refugees from Sudan.
Yes.
The other day we've been hosting Southern Sudanese.
Yes.
And Somalia and other countries.
Yes.
So now we'll in the near future, if they don't get into the negotiating table and they agree on how, then that's what we ought to experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Sheikh, I think that brings us to the end of our review of today's Friday Bulletin. I'm being informed because of time we have to wrap it up. But thank you so much. In finishing off with a very sad but very impactful story, especially affecting the Muslims in Sudan. All we can say is, our thoughts and prayers are definitely with our brothers and sisters in Sudan. Sheikh Salim, thank you so much.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
Any parting shots?
I think generally, can you look at Muslim countries? We are used a lot.
Yes.
And in most of these civil wars, they are not civil wars.
It's true.
We are used as proxies to fight, to have our own infighting, and then there are beneficiaries who benefit from those countries.
Yes.
So, and as Muslim countries, it's time we wake up and stop, stop working for other people.
Yes, a very powerful closing statement, and that once again brings us to the end of our show today. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Horizon TV. We'll be back next week, inshallah, same time, same date. My name is Nadia Osman, and my sign language interpreter was Ilhan Noor. Until next time, ma'as salam.